Well, welcome to the first annual Inclusion Fusion Special Needs Ministry Seminar, sponsored by Key Ministries and Pajama Conferences. My name is Connie Hutchinson, and I've been the Director of Disabilities Ministry at the First Evangelical Free Church for almost 20 years. Before I start, let me tell you a little bit about myself and our family. I have been married to my husband Mike for 40 years. We celebrated our 40th anniversary last June. We have 3 adult children. Our oldest daughter, Julie, is 36. She has Down syndrome and is what brought us into the world of disabilities 36 years ago. Our son, Matt, is 34. He's married to Karen. They have a little daughter, Ellie, that delights me when I am with her every week as grandma. Matt is a special ed teacher at a high school in Los Angeles, and my youngest daughter, Katie, is 26. She and her husband, Robbie, both work with children 3 to 5 in the school district with autism, and Robbie is actually the autism specialist in our district. So they have 2 little boys, Andrew and Timmy, and our world really involves around disabilities in many different ways. When I was asked to speak for this conference, trying to decide what I would like to talk with you about, I kept going back to the fact that this is Inclusion Fusion, and I thought the best thing for me to do would be to tell you about my daughter Julie and her road to independence and how inclusion has played such an important part in her life, inclusion into our community and inclusion into our church. And so I'm going to, for the first half, run you through Julie's life, the different experiences she's had from birth until now. And then I'm going to invite Julie up to talk with you a little bit about her experiences being included in our church. But let me open in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for our time together this morning. We thank you for your word and the way you have told us that we are all fearfully and wonderfully made by you. We celebrate the lives of everyone in their uniquenesses. Especially we were celebrating today all the gifts that people with disabilities have and what they can bring into our churches. Be with us in the next 45 minutes or so as we share Julie's life with each of those that are watching this today, Father. In your precious name we pray. Amen. Well, Julie was born on September 3rd, 1975. 2 days before she was born, another young man who's become important in our life was born, named David. The night before Julie's birthday, I was at a baby shower given by the newly married moms at our church. We were in the newly married class at that time. And in the middle of all the excitement of the games and what we were doing, somebody said, "Did you hear the news that John and Patty's baby, who had been born on Sunday, had been diagnosed that day with Down syndrome?" We were all stunned. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know that much about Down syndrome. But as we were standing there quietly pausing in the festivities of the baby shower, someone who had been to the hospital to see John and Patty and meet David that day said, "You know what? They want you to understand that their baby is a gift from God, created just the way he is for their family, and they don't want you to feel upset." Whoa. Well, that night, 5 weeks early, at the baby shower, I went into labor. And so on the way to the hospital, my husband and I talked about what we had just heard that evening regarding David's birth. And I can remember saying to Mike, "Wow, I wonder if we would have the same thoughts, if we would be as accepting if something like that was to happen in our lives." Never dreaming that the next day we would be at that same place. We would be giving birth to our first child, our daughter Julie, who has Down syndrome. Now, after Julie was born, my doctor came in to see me and was talking about releasing me to go home. He had not been with me for the delivery. He'd been out of town. So I finally mentioned to him, do you know that they think that our baby has Down syndrome? And he said, yes. Don't worry, this never happened, will have to happen again. He said, there is a test called amniocentesis, and he took his prescription pad out of his pocket and he wrote it down so I'd know how to spell it. And he said, next time you're pregnant, we will do this test and you'll never have to go through this again. I looked at him and I said, well, whoa, wait a minute. You know what's gotten me through the last 24 hours has been, I keep going back to Psalm 139, where God says, we are all fearfully and wonderfully made by Him, and our days were numbered before we were ever born. God doesn't make mistakes. He created my daughter just the way she is to glorify Him. How could I then the next time I was pregnant say, oops, Lord, you made a mistake this time? This doctor just kind of looked at me with a blank look, and the ironic thing about this was he was an evangelical Christian, I thought. I knew that is why I picked him in the first place to deliver my baby. So I was very disappointed, as I've learned over the years, that there are many people, even in our churches, that don't understand sanctity of life the way I hope you and I do. Well, my husband called a geneticist from the hospital who came and talked with us. And this was, remember, 36 years ago, but she told us that, early intervention is just starting. You do not know what the potential of your child will be because there are so many more services, and it's a new world for people with disabilities. So we left the hospital with hope, not really knowing what was ahead, but knowing that God did have a plan for our daughter. I'm not to say there weren't hard days. There weren't days when I mourned for my daughter, that she wouldn't do things that I had thought she might be doing when I was pregnant. But I soon learned that she had many unique gifts that she had to offer to complement our family. But as I went home from the hospital, I was told that there was something called early intervention that was just starting to develop around the country. So when Julie was 6 weeks old, she started her first early intervention class. And off we would go every Friday morning, where I would be with a group of moms with infants, toddlers who had disabilities, and I would start thinking, oh, if I did this exercise or worked on this, it was going to make all the difference. Someone wisely told me at that time that probably the best thing I could do for Julie would be to treat her like any other child, to have expectations for her, to expect her to behave, to bring her with us out into the community, to include her in everything that we did as a family. And I think that has served well over the years, that she's a social butterfly, she is part of whatever we do, and she has just really been an integral part of our family, and you can tell the influence she's had when her siblings have gone into the roles that they have. Well, when Julie was 3, she was going to a program at that point at Easter Seals. There were no programs in regular nursery schools at that time that would include a person with disabilities. So up to this point, Julie was always in programs for kids with special needs. I can remember when it was time for her to be tested to go into the public school system. And I put my mother bear armor on, and I was determined that Julie was going to have every chance she could at school. At that point in time, there were 2 categories for people with cognitive disabilities. You tested either in the MR, or mentally retarded range, or the EMR, educable mentally retarded age range. So there was no way Julie was going to be in the MR range. I can remember going to that first testing at the school district. There was a young psychologist named Dennis who was testing her, and I was ready to just fight. Because we had two programs in our district at that time. We had a segregated program for people with disabilities, and then we had some programs that were on site at regular schools for the EMR classification. Well, as Dennis tested Julie and she was doing pretty well, he got to a certain point and he said her IQ was now in the range of educable. And so he said, I think I need to stop now. She is kind of stopped. I don't know if it's because she is tired or she's almost 4 years old, or if that's the ceiling we should put on her. But he gave me an IQ for Julie, and that was the last IQ test we've ever allowed Julie to take. Because you see, I decided at that time it didn't matter what her IQ was. She was Julie. And I didn't want anybody to look at a low IQ and decide, well, she's not capable of doing something. I wanted people to look at her for who she was. So there were times when we had IEPs, we had meetings with the school district when they just kind of shook their head. We did all kinds of other testing, but we never did that IQ testing again. Now, I want to tell you a story about when Julie was 7 years old. She had been in a special day class up to this point, and she had been in a special day room right next to a kindergarten classroom. So part of the day, she would be allowed to go next door to the kindergarten room. The last day of school, they went on a field trip to the Children's Museum. And the teacher from the kindergarten class said, you know what, Julie fit in with everybody else. Now, this was back before the word inclusion was ever thought of. The word mainstreaming was used. And so my husband and I were at an IEP meeting, and we said, after we had heard about this successful trip to the Children's Museum, we said, could Julie be in the regular kindergarten class next year? She knows her alphabet, she knows her numbers. I think she might be kindergarten ready. I'd like to give her a chance. I'll never forget the psychologist that said, ma'am, you can't do that. She has Down syndrome. I said, exactly, I realize she has Down syndrome. That's who she is, it's okay. And he said, well, if you want her to be in a regular kindergarten class, you have to sign her out of special ed, no more services, she can't have speech, she can't have transportation provided. You need to just sign her up at the local, your neighborhood kindergarten, and basically kind of sink or swim. I said, well, she's in a special day class right now where she's the only one that has any language, and her social skills are her best asset at this point. I don't like the behaviors she's seen modeled to her day after day in this special class. I would love to have her in a kindergarten class just to see how she would do. They said, fine, go ahead. I will never forget that first day of kindergarten, waiting outside the classroom with other moms to hear one mom say, did you hear there is a boy that has Mongolism in this group? And I said, excuse me, the appropriate term is Down syndrome. It's not a little boy. You're talking about my daughter. She would really like to be friends with your sons and daughters too. So that's how we started our first experience in an inclusion situation. You know, my heart would break. I was told we cannot do any awareness training for Julie to be in here, that she just needed to be like everyone else. So I had dropped her off in the morning. I would watch her run to a group of kids. I'd watch them go the other way. I would watch her at recess when I'd park by and observe, and she didn't really have any friends. She started doing behaviors we had never seen. She would stay up on the monkey bars and not come down. She pulled chairs out from a couple kids at the tables. She was soaping mirrors in the bathroom. She was crying out for help. when I'd put her to bed at night and we would do her prayers, she would say, "It's okay, Mom. Dad loves me, you love me, and God loves me." And I was breaking inside. So I thought, okay, inclusion's not working. So I heard about a teacher in another district who had a classroom. It was an alternative classroom. There were kids from kindergarten through third grade in her classroom. There was lots of parent participation. And this teacher would give assignments to each kid individually. Every night she would do math problems, language arts activities geared for each individual child. But this teacher was looking for a child with a disability. She thought it would be very advantageous for her students to understand different was okay, that people with disabilities belonged together. What a pioneer back in those days. And so I quickly went and volunteered to have Julie in her class. But this time I went into the class first and I talked with the kids. And I said, you know what, I have a daughter, she has Down syndrome. It means she learns a little slower than you. You might not understand her speech real well, but this is what's been happening to her at the school that she's been. And as a mom, it's just breaking my heart. I will never forget, one little boy rose his hand and he said, "I think she should come to our class. Life would be really, really boring if we all had the same IQ." A second grader saying this. There was another girl, I brought a picture of Julie and she had her glasses on in the picture, and this little girl raises her hand and she says, "I think she would fit in great because look, she has glasses like me." So in 20 minutes, with just a little bit of awareness, we had a group of kids ready to receive Julie into their classroom. Julie was in that classroom for almost 3 years. It was probably the best time of her school experience in many ways. These kids came to Special Olympics to watch her run. They invited her to birthday parties. She was invited to more birthday parties than she'd ever been before. Typically, kids with disabilities are not included in birthday parties and social events. So it was just a real special time in her life. And I learned what we did when we put her into that kindergarten situation at our neighborhood school. We had just dumped her into that situation and we had hoped it would work without any preparation, without any awareness training. So I've learned over the years that kids are great. It's usually the parents that are a harder sell. Kids are accepting, and you just tell them a little bit about someone with a disability, and they're there usually with open arms, and for their benefit as well as for ours. Well, there came a point when Julie outgrew that class, and it was time to bring her back into the school system in the district where we lived. And so I took Julie with me, and we went to various special day classes on regular elementary school campuses. And she picked one, and as far as inclusion went, she was included at lunchtime and at recess time. There were a couple instances where kids who didn't really understand would ask her to do things, and she would do them, making wrong choices simply because she thought she would be then accepted into their group. So there was a learning curve there too. But when she was graduating from elementary school, it was time to go into junior high. In our district, at that time, there were 2 options for junior high. When you had a disability, you could go to the segregated special education school that was from pretty much 3 years old through 22, or they now had a special day class on the junior high campus. I will never forget, my husband and I took Julie out to the spaghetti factory for dinner. We wanted her to be part of the decision on whether she went to the segregated school or the junior high. And we told her that it would be kind of tough to be at the junior high. Her friend Jill, who has Down syndrome also, is a year and a half older than Julie. She'd been the first one with Down syndrome to go to the junior high the year before. Jill, at that point, well, I guess I could still say at this point, she loved boys. So she wanted a boyfriend more than anything. Her mom tells of the evening that she went in her room and got dressed up and was so excited and stood by the front door. Her mom said, "What are you doing?" And she said, well, she was waiting for a specific boy to come over because he told her he was going to come over and they were going to do something special that evening, and he would be there at 7:30. Well, Jill's mom knew that that probably wasn't the case, but she couldn't get Jill to budge from that door for almost 2 hours. 7 o'clock came and went, 8 o'clock came and went, 8:30 came. And so we explained to Julie, you know what, it might be tough being at the junior high, but there might be some really exciting opportunities too. You can go to the segregated school and we will support you if that's what you choose. Without hesitation, she said to us, no, I want to go to the junior high. I want to be a junior higher like everyone else. So, okay, but remember, at any point in time, if you want to change your mind, it's okay with us. We're behind you. Julie went through junior high and she went through high school in special day classes. At that time, inclusion was starting to become a word. And so there were usually certain teachers on a school campus that would be advocates and would understand the value of having kids with disabilities in their classrooms. In junior high, everyone took the elective, I don't know why you called it elective because you had to take it, chorus for a semester. The chorus teacher was wonderful, partially because she had a daughter with a disability. But she wanted every student to understand the value of everyone, regardless of their abilities, disabilities, whatever their talents were. And because everybody could be in choir, or needed to be in choir as an elective, there were people of many musical abilities in choir. Julie loved junior high choir, chorus. She went to Catalina for their field trip. Her dad went along as a chaperone. She still to this day talks about the fun she had in that choir. Actually, the choir teacher at Christmas had the whole choir go to a segregated special ed high school and perform for them. And then at the choir concert they did at the school, she had each choir member tell what the highlight was when they sang to the students with disabilities. It was a really moving evening. That teacher understood. Fast forward to an experience in high school. The only teacher on the campus at that time that was willing to include someone with a disability in a class was the choir, chorus teacher. But there was a big difference. In this junior high choir, everyone who was in the choir tried out. You had an audition because they went and they performed. They went to other schools, they wore the long pretty dresses, the boys were in suits, and you were graded. It was a competition. So this teacher came to us at the IEP and said Julie was more than welcome to be in his group, but she just wasn't going to go to the competitions. I said, well, wait a minute. Now you have to understand, in our home, we don't do happy birthday well. There is nobody musical in our house. Sometimes I look at families that have many members that can sing, and I think, Lord, why did you forget us? But Julie is just like me, and singing isn't her gift. So I could understand why this teacher thought maybe she wouldn't be part of the performances. However, I tried to explain to him, well, you know, I think what she was going to really like about the choir was the long, beautiful dress and the interaction with the others. So I really don't think that that's where we want to include her. But what I do want you to do, I want her to try out for choir like everyone else. She needs to audition. She needs to have that life experience that if she has a gift to sing, she will make the choir. If she doesn't, she needs to be there when the list is put on the wall and she reads down and she finds her name isn't on there. Just like when I tried out for drill team and failed miserably in high school. That's a life experience she needed to have too. The teacher thought I was pretty mean, but okay. So Julie tried out for choir. She came home when the results were posted at school. She was tearful and said, I didn't make choir, Mom. But you know what? That was a lesson she needed to learn. We don't include people with disabilities just to be nice. We include them where they can fit too. One other quick story about the value of inclusion and disability awareness was when Julie was in high school. Julie was in our high school department at church at that point, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I had been trying to get disability awareness programs, assemblies or whatever in the schools, but I wasn't getting really far at that point. And so you can do that in church, I thought. And our church is large, and we had about 200 in our high school group at that time. So we had a man by the name of Steve Chance, who was in his late 20s, come and speak with the high school group. Now, Steve has cerebral palsy. He can walk, but he is very unsteady on his feet, and he has difficulties in certain areas. So he came and he told our high school students how his life was turned around when he was in high school in 9th grade in the Midwest where he lived, and someone invited him to a Young Life activity through their school. That's where he learned about Jesus, and he also learned that he had value. People in this Young Life group would take him out on the lake. They would include him in things. So he told these high school students at our church what that meant to him. He also told them, you know what, can you imagine how hard it is for me to eat peas the way I shake? And he let them ask questions, and he is married and told them about his life, and they listened. Because I was a couple months later at an IEP for Julie, and we're sitting in the room, and somebody said, you know, it's been very amazing. Julie doesn't eat lunch with the special ed students anymore. We went looking for her, we couldn't find her. And there under the flagpole, we have noticed she's eating with a group of about 30 kids every day, and included. I thought a minute and I smiled and I said, oh, those are kids from our church. Because you know what? Those 30 kids heard a man named Steve Chance talk about how inclusion had changed his life. And one of those girls came up to me a few weeks later and she said, I go to El Dorado where your daughter goes, and I was just wondering, do you know where she eats lunch? And I told her, and she said, well, we're going to go and we're going to ask her to come and eat lunch with us. So for her junior and senior year in high school, Julie had lunch with this group. What a difference that made. Now, they didn't call her up to take her to the movies every week or do lots of other things, but they were her friends at lunch every day. And what a difference that made. Well, after high school, And Julie went into a transition program till she was 21. Julie's brother was away at college, and Julie kept saying, I want to go away at college. And I would say, well, I'm sorry, but really you have Down syndrome and there isn't a college that I know of. Well, we were in Arizona at a Down syndrome convention one summer. And Julie was also, they had a convention going on at the same time for individuals with Down syndrome. So she was going to a workshop on her track, and then a little later we went to a workshop, and there was a man from Northern California talking about his program called TIL, Training in Independent Living, at Taft, which is a small little town up near Bakersfield, California. And his idea was to have a program where people with disabilities could learn how to live independently. So Julie came out of there and said, I'm going. And we said, we'll see. So that started the process as we started to get Julie into the possible acceptance into Taft College. And 3 years later, she was the first student from our county that was accepted into the program, and we took her up to Taft to drop her off. This is a small community college, a 2-year college, but they have actually dorms that have been built. You usually don't have dorms on a 2-year college, but as the man who was pumping gas for us, it wasn't self-serve, it was pumping gas for us when we went up for the interview, said to us, as he looked in the window, he said, oh, hi, and what are you here for? And we said, well, we came to observe your program. Oh, our TIL program. Well, we have those dorms because we started to have a football program, and did you know that you can't recruit within the state, but you can go out of state? So we went to Idaho, we got some football players, and they were so rowdy, we built them dorms. We didn't like football in this town, so got rid of football, but we had these dorms standing there, so what would we do with them? So someone had the vision of, let's use these dorms to teach people with disabilities how to be independent. Wow. So that's what happened. I will never forget. We spent the weekend moving Julie into her room, got all ready to go, and she looked at us and she said, change my mind. I'm not going here. You can't leave me. And she started to cry. That was probably the hardest thing as a mom, to release her. It was hard enough to have her 4 hours away. But to say, no, Julie, because I love you, because I know you want this, I'm going to leave you here. My husband thinks that's the longest ride we ever had in the car going home. I think I cried the entire way home. And the following day, I didn't call her until that evening because I knew I needed to give her space. Well, I called her that night. She answered the phone, and I said, Julie, how you doing? Fine. I said, how long did you cry after we left? She said, Mom, I didn't cry. I sobbed. She said, but it's okay. I'm ready to go. So that started her 2-year journey at a college, preparing her to live on her own. And well, I'll tell you one other little quick story about that. She'd been there 4 months, and it was Thanksgiving, and they said that they were going to teach her how to come home on the train independently. And I thought, whoa. But she had to take, for the first 2 hours, you take the bus because the train didn't go all the way through the grapevine up there. And then you have a layover at Union Station in LA, which isn't in the best part of town. And then you wait, and then you get on the train to come down to where we are. I was petrified. So I told her brother, who was coming down from college to be with us on Thanksgiving, I said, would you do me a favor? Would you please kind of be a little mouse in the corner of that train station, and don't let her see you, but would you hide and just be sure she's protected and she does okay? Well, he's at the train station calling me, and he says, hey, Mom, I just want you to know, I'm not the only one watching her. I go, really? So apparently the school had also sent somebody, so they're not just sending them out to the wolves right away. So that was an encouragement to me, but on Julie's part, She made it to the train, she made it home, and she's had 3 or 4 trips up there since then. So she really did learn how to be independent. Things that I never would have thought when she was born she'd be able to do. When she graduated, she came back home. And as far as I was concerned, if she lived with me for the rest of her life, that was fine, because I was petrified about finding an apartment for her to live on her own. And Julie was determined. We applied for low-income housing for her, our HUD housing in our area, trying to get her as independent as we could, so when something happens to us, her brother and her sister and their spouses can oversee her. But she's been very firm in saying she wants to always live on her own. One of the ironic things we thought would sure be nice if she had a roommate. How the low-income housing that helps subsidize her rent works, she cannot have a female roommate. When we asked, when she got her voucher to get an apartment, when we said, can she have a roommate? They said, ma'am, this is low-income family housing. A live-in boyfriend would be fine, but she can't live with a girl. So that's been something that's been an issue. Why can't she have a roommate? But she lives in an apartment complex with another graduate from the TIL program at Taft. They live close by their apartments in the 2 different buildings, and she told me the other day that Robin was over. They played Monopoly last Friday night. Yesterday I picked both of them up from bowling and took them home. So even though they're not living together, she does have that friendship. Working is an issue. It's hard in this economy for people to find jobs, especially people with disabilities. Julie was so fortunate. For 5.5, 6 years, she worked for a man, Boyd Coddington, who had a hot rod shop. He built hot rods for people and special wheels, and he had a showroom where Julie would dust the cars with a feather duster. He had a shop where they sold shirts, and Julie would do inventories on the shirts. That was wonderful. She had a purpose, a place to go every day to work. She worked from 9 to noon, and by the time she took the bus, she would be home by 2. And he suddenly passed away a few years ago due to an accident, a fall he had. And subsequently, a few months later, his business was sold, so Julie became unemployed. We haven't been able to find a job for her since then, but she keeps busy. She has a little shredding business. So there's a counselor at our church that he gives her a lot of testing results that she shreds for him. And she has a couple other people that bring boxes of shredding that she does in her apartment. So that keeps her busy. And she keeps busy in other ways too. I would say what's been so successful for Julie in many ways, the circle of friends that she has. She has her family, her brother, her sister, her niece and nephews. Julie has been a maid of honor for her sister. She's been a bridesmaid for her sister-in-law. She is so involved helping with the kids. They are there on a moment's notice if she needs help. She has cousins. She has an aunt that takes her out to dinner once a month. She has friends. She has friends from church. She has friends from school. She has friends that call and bring her places that she wants to go. Regional Center is the agency in our state that provides services for people with disabilities if they become disabled before they're 18. Julie has been a consumer of Regional Center since she was young, since she was born actually. Regional Center provides someone to come. She has 2 different young women who come to her house at her apartment twice a week for a couple hours. They take her grocery shopping, they take her banking, help her do her checkbook, help her with those skills she needs some assistance with so that she's able to live on her own. And then there's the church. I would like to read to you an article that Julie wrote with my help when she was, well, it was in 1990. And it kind of tells her story through the church up to that point. It's called Keep Everyone Together. She says, I was made in the image of God and born on September 3rd, 1975. The doctors told my parents that I had Down syndrome. This means I learn slower than most of you. I wish I didn't have Down syndrome, but I know it's the way God created me to live for Him. When I was little, I went to Sunday school like everyone else in our church. When I was 6, I stayed with my mom in the 4-year-old class where she was the teacher and I was her helper. When I was 10, my sister Katie was born and my mom stopped teaching the 4-year-old class. Lots of people thought I should go to the special education class at church because I was different. I didn't want to. In the special ed class, there were students from 10 to 40 years old. One man was 23 and wanted to marry me. This was scary and I didn't like it. I loved to sing. I started going to the special ed class only for the first service and then to our King's Kids choir practice for the second service. It was great singing with the kids in front of the church, and I sang in 2 musicals. I was sad when I got too old for the kids' choir. Last June, I listened to my brother talk about starting in the junior high group at church and all the fun things they did. I wanted to be with teenagers too. Mom and Dad talked with the junior high pastor, and he said I could be part of the group. I was so excited. I went to summer camp, and I am in a Sunday morning core group with 10 other girls. On Wednesday nights, I go to Youth Mania. It's fun, but I wish the girls were really my friends. Maybe if I had been with them from the beginning, they would know me better as a person and know that I'm just a regular person with regular feelings who is more like them than unlike them. I hope that in your churches you keep everyone together whenever you can. Well, at that point in time when Julie wrote that, I was in a prayer group with 4 other couples, and one of the couples was on the pastor staff at our church. And so when the prayer meeting was at your house, you could bring up any topic you wanted to talk about that night. So I read this that Julie had written. And this Pastor Doug said, can I take you and your husband out to lunch tomorrow? And can we talk about why disability ministry might be important for a church? That we should have this at our church? At that point in time, we did have a disability ministry that was thriving at one point in the early 80s, back when everyone with a disability, regardless if it was a physical disability, a cognitive disability, you were 4 years old or 40 years old, you were all in one room and kind of in the back so that the parents could go to church. And at this point in time in the 90s, inclusion was coming. People were not coming to churches if their kids couldn't be included in Sunday school in some way. So that class that had thrived for years with probably at one point 35 individuals being served was now down to about 4 or 5. And I realized that we needed to do a philosophy change at our church. We needed to look at kids, look at people individually. We needed to include them in the whole body life of the church. And so I can remember talking with Doug, and then he went and talked with others in the church, and it was decided that we wanted to have a disability ministry at our church. And that was back when disability ministry really was pretty unknown. But I remember going into Pastor Swindoll's office and saying, you know, you need to understand disability ministry, it will always be small in number. It won't be cost effective. It won't go away. People with disabilities are not like people that go to the divorce recovery group and move on in their life, or people with disabilities usually have their disability for their entire life, and we need to serve them continually. It would be awful to start and then stop. We would do more harm than good. We also talked about how disabilities affects the entire church. So it's not just Connie, the disability lady, that needs to be involved. If we have a child that's in elementary school, The children's department needs to be helping us. Junior high, high school, our missions department needs to understand that this is an unreached mission field, people with disabilities. Our psychologist needs to know, our church counselor, that if a family is told their baby will probably have a disability, he needs to be there to help counsel the parents. We all need to be there when the baby is born to reach out and help the family. This is what disability ministry means. If this is what we're working towards, I want to be part of it. At the time, our pastor, Chuck Swindoll, he understood that. He got it. I will never forget one of the early sermons he did when we had just started disability ministry. I wrote it down. I want to read it to you. A statement that Chuck made during a sermon, and he said, "How thrilling it is to know that this church that we all love has a ministry for the disabled. They are not pushed away into some back room and sort of kept out of our way. They are not in our way. They are part of our way. To be integrated into the flow and ministry of this family. For if it won't happen here, where in the world will it happen?" We started a disability ministry at our church that has grown over the years. I have learned over time there are many students that come that we cannot include. It wouldn't be appropriate for whatever variety of reasons. You might include a child in a regular Sunday school class one year. It might not work the next year. What you do need to do is look at each person individually and their families. My job description is to identify and break down barriers that keep people with disabilities and their families from being able to fully participate in the body life of our church. It's that simple. So when we talk about Julie's involvement in our church, as a baby, she tried going to the church nursery, but every Tuesday we would be at the doctor's office with a cold, with strep throat, with something, because her immune system was so fragile until she was 5 years old and she had her open heart surgery. Then she was able to come to church with us every Sunday. But so for most of her preschool years, she went to her grandparents and had a special morning with them while we went to church. When she was, as she said in her little talk, during elementary years, pretty much she helped me be a helper in the 4-year-old Sunday school class where I worked. But when her brother was in junior high, she was invited to be in junior high too. Those were great memories. I'll never forget the evening she came home and said, "Mom, we went out and toilet papered a house." That was something I never thought I would hear her say when she was born. I can remember in high school, there were activities that I knew that wouldn't be real easy to take her along with. When they went on the 3-day trip to the beach and she would get so sunburned or whatever, maybe that wouldn't work. But there'd be other activities that she would have a great time at. She was with a group of girls and had a wonderful time going to different events with them. When she was in college, she joined the college group for a while, and their academic discussions became just too much for her, and she decided on her own, "I've had it. I want to go to our Fellowship of Friends class." We have an adult fellowship at our church for adults who have developmental disabilities, where they can talk about their specific needs, their prayer requests, have their own lesson. That's great. She chose to be in that class. But that group also is part of the church in every other aspect too. They're not segregated in the back. They're there by choice. Special church activities that she's been involved with. We had a church Special Olympics team, a track and field team that she participated with, and it was a great way to get other people from the church, other high schoolers as coaches involved. She has been to summer camp with our family at Forest Home. She's been to Johnny and Friends Family Retreat and been helped there. But she has several things that she's doing currently that she's involved with that I would like to stop here and invite Julie to come up and share with you a little bit of what she's doing here at EV Free. Well, I decided to invite Julie up to be part of this, and she was pretty excited when she heard this was the pajama conference and that you were watching on your computers, because what did you tell me this morning? Maybe we should be able to what? Wear our
pajamas.
Yeah, but we decided we'd dress for you, so we'd like to just take a little bit time here at the end to share what Julie's doing now at our church. 2 years ago, after we had our deacon board elections, we have a deacon board that's a service board that the chairman is allowed to invite 2 or 3 non-voting members that weren't part of the election process. So you were invited to be part of the deacon board, is that true?
Yes, I was.
So you were on, Julie was on the deacon board for about 9 months before the following year's election. Now, this was the first time someone with a disability, a cognitive disability, was put on the ballot. Julie, were you nervous about running?
A little bit.
Did you win?
Yes.
You did. So you are now a full-fledged deaconess, right?
I sure am.
Okay. So let's tell them what your duties as a deaconess are. What do you do, for instance, is it the third Sunday of every month?
Third Sunday every month, yes. I greet people coming to our church and also in our family of our church.
Okay, and what happens if they don't know where to take their children or whatever? What do you do?
I help them look for their class or whatever they need to find.
Great. Okay. Now, on the third Sunday of the month, so fourth Sunday of the month, that's the third Sunday. What do you do on the fourth Sunday of the month?
The fourth thing, I help with communion setup, where I help break the crackers, and also I put cups in little holes around, like a big round plate.
On the tray, okay.
On the tray. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and you are on one other committee called the Bereavement Committee. What do you do on the Bereavement Committee?
On the bereavement community, I help after more services at the reception. I put cookies out, do the punch, but mainly comfort the family.
Comfort the family. And you are, because that is one of your spiritual gifts, Julie, I think, is you have that compassion, that gift of mercy, and you are always with a smile and really helping out. So they appreciate when they see your smiling face at their memorial services as they celebrate the life of their family member who has gone to be in heaven, huh?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Let's see. We have a program that we're involved in here at church called Royal Family Kids Camp that's nationwide. Some of you might have Royal Family in your churches. And I have been the director for our Royal Family for the last 10 years. Royal Family is a week-long camp in the summer reaching out to 7 to 11-year-olds in the foster care system. Many of the kids have been abused or neglected. Well, for the last 3 years, I've brought you along with me. The kids love you, don't they?
Yes.
Okay. Well, at Royal Family, every evening we give the counselors a break, and so you and I will go into individual cabins and we would talk to the kids. It's amazing. What do you usually talk about?
Talk about my life, my disability.
It's amazing how these kids who have been in various situations in foster care, been moved from place to place, have been the underdog many times. They relate so to Julie, and they will tell you and open up in ways that they might not do with us. So you've had quite a ministry at our Royal Family. This year at Royal Family, every night after dinner, we had a campfire, and we had a different speaker each night talk about how we all have choices to make in life, whether we choose drugs, whether we choose alcohol, whatever the individual talked about. But the night Julie talked, you talked about how there are certain things in our lives that we do not have a choice over. Specifically, what did you tell them you did not have a choice?
The choice I didn't have is to not have a disability.
Right, so you had no control over the fact that you had Down syndrome.
No.
I can remember there were times when you were growing up, especially in your early teens, when you would say, I hate having Down syndrome. But you made a choice, I remember, when you were about 16. What was that choice?
Is to follow God put Him in my heart, in my life.
And that you chose, well, didn't you make the choice that you weren't going to be upset over the fact that you had Down syndrome? But what did you realize?
I realized to be positive about my Down syndrome in God's family.
Was it the way
Have the attitude of God, faith in God.
that's how He made you, right?
That's what I was saying. Yes.
Right, and you have gifts. Now, you said you made the choice to receive Christ. Do you remember when you first received Christ? When you did receive Christ? When did you ask Jesus into your heart?
When I was 5 years old, sitting on the hospital bed with my mom. She asked me if something happened, where would I go? And I said, I'll be in heaven with my Father, God.
Why did you know you would be in heaven with God?
Because I know
Did you ask Him into your heart?
I asked Him to be in my heart.
We prayed that night, didn't we, before you went into your heart surgery?
Yes, we
That's
did.
right.
We prayed.
Okay, so that was a choice that you made. But is it easy having Down syndrome?
It's not easy to have Down syndrome, no.
Would you rather not?
I'd rather not, but it's good for being positive and mainly being positive in the faith of God. If I had no faith, I'd be nothing. But with faith through God, I know I have positive influence through Him for others.
And you really have had a lot of positive influence, Julie. Let's talk a little bit about when we went to North Africa. 2 years ago, our church had a campaign that all of our short-term mission for the summer would be in a country in North Africa. And in church one Sunday, they asked if anyone was interested to come to the booth at the missions fair. And before, I have been to Romania and a couple other places, to China, and you have always told me that there's no way you were going to travel on an airplane for that long and go anywhere. And so I was very surprised. After you heard in the service that day, what did you do?
I went and told my mom, oh, I'd like to go tomorrow to North Africa.
That's right, that you'd like to go to North Africa. And I was I said, well, you'd have to do a few things. We'd need to check with your cardiologist and see if he thought it was good for you to be on a long airplane ride like that and to be in a country like that. I kind of thought he was going to say no. What did he say?
He said, yes, it'd be good for me to go.
Okay, so that barrier was... So then I can remember the day I said, well, Julie, you need to fill out the application like everyone else. That you did. And I told you that you would need to go get pictures because you would need a passport, and you'd need to get pictures for your passport. What did you do?
I went with my worker, and we went to Save On, and we went to get my passport.
Well, you went to, but when I asked you about the pictures, where were they at that point? They were in your purse. You took them out. You'd already gone and got them. So that's when I knew we were serious, that we were going to go to North Africa together. And we did. Now, we were there for 2 weeks. We were in 3 different facilities. We saw about 150 teenage, primarily boys, with autism and Down syndrome. And we sure had a lot of staff people looking at us, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
And we had, on our team, we had you, we had me, some special ed teachers, a speech therapist, we had an occupational therapist. So we went all ready to tell all about our lives and how to help them with our skills. Who was the one that they kept asking questions to and were so amazed with?
About me.
They asked you everything. They could not believe that you lived by yourself, that you went out of your house. Most of these teenagers and people with disabilities in other countries, they don't understand the value of disabilities and what people with disabilities can do. And so you were quite an inspiration. On the last day that we were there, we were invited to the director of all these programs. He invited us to tea, which was quite an honor. Again, who did he continually talk with?
Me, Julie.
With you, that's right. And can you remember what he said when we left?
He said, Julie, thank you for showing us that we are 50 years behind with our disabilities over in North Africa. And thank you for coming.
That's right. He said, you've shown us that we need to start looking at the potential of people with disabilities. We are 50 years behind. We need to start realizing that people with disabilities should not just be kept back out of everyone's way, that they should be part of our way. That's right. Anything else you would like to share before we're done? I think our time is almost out. Now you live on your own.
Yes, I do.
You spend a lot of time here at our church. Your apartment is only about 5 minutes away, so you walk down here a lot, don't you?
Yes, I've walked down here a lot.
Would you like to encourage people to be sure that they find places for people in their church with disabilities to serve?
Yes, I encourage them, disabilities, other churches, to serve and be part of the church family.
That's right. Now, not only are you part of our class, the Fellowship of Friends class, that is primarily people with disabilities, but you went on your own. We have many adult classes on our campus, and you found a class called what?
All ages and stages.
All ages and stages. You went on your own. So I think it's been almost 5 years now. You're a member of that class.
Yes, I am.
So you're part of the group where you share your prayer requests. You go on outings. You're an important part of that class. And do you have anything you want to share about all ages, or?
Well, it's a good class. We are a family itself. With one of my teachers, when I was a kid, Dennis, and his wife, Karen. Now they're also my teachers as a grown-up on autism stages and Mel Howe. And they were two good influences in my life, the same with Glenda and their family. So I encourage you guys, for people with disabilities, if you have that chance to go out, be a part of a family, that would be a great thing to do.
Okay. Well, in closing, I just want to make a couple statements for you to think about. God does not ask us about our abilities or our disabilities, but He asks us about our availabilities. Be sure that in your churches, you give people with disabilities opportunities to be available to use their gifts and to serve you, not only to be served by you. And secondly, Johnny Erickson Tata, when she spoke at our church, she said something once that I will never forget. She said, "A person with a disability can do more for the spiritual well-being of the church than you can imagine." And we have found that to be so true, that people with disabilities will bring more to the spiritual development, to the spiritual well-being of your church than you will ever imagine. So give them a chance. Hope you've enjoyed listening. We've enjoyed talking with these people.
Yes, we
Even
have.
though we don't have our pajamas on, huh?
Right.
And we just hope you have a good day.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.